Picture this. You're lying in bed at 2 a.m., staring at the ceiling, replaying that conversation over and over. Maybe it's your ex who broke your heart 6 months ago. Maybe it's the job you didn't get. Or perhaps it's something your parents said 20 years ago that still stings. We've all been there, trapped in our own mental prison, unable to move forward. But what if I told you that one of history's most brilliant minds had already mapped out the exact psychological territory you're stuck in? And more importantly, what if he left us a roadmap to get out? Carl Jung wasn't just any psychologist. This was the man who gave us concepts like introversion, extroversion, and the collective unconscious. But here's what most people don't know. Jung spent decades studying why some people get stuck in their past, while others seem to glide through life's transitions like they have some secret manual. Today, we're going to uncover that manual. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why you've been approaching moving on completely wrong, and how Jung's revolutionary insights can finally set you free. Let me start with Sarah's story. Sarah came to therapy because she couldn't stop thinking about her former best friend who had betrayed her trust. Every time someone mentioned that friend's name, Sarah felt this burning rage that she couldn't shake. She'd tried everything: positive thinking, meditation, even blocking the friend on all social media. Nothing worked. Here's what Jung would have told Sarah, and what he's telling you right now. You can't move on because you're trying to run from your shadow. Jung discovered that we all have what he called a shadow self, the parts of ourselves we don't want to acknowledge. When someone hurts us, we often project our own capacity for betrayal, anger, or weakness onto them. We make them the villain, so we don't have to face the uncomfortable truth that we're capable of the same things. Sarah couldn't move on because she refused to acknowledge her own shadow. She'd never admitted that she, too, had betrayed friends in the past. She'd never owned her capacity for selfishness or cruelty. The friend had become a mirror, reflecting back everything Sarah hated about herself. But here's the twist Jung discovered. The moment you acknowledge your shadow, it loses its power over you. Now you might be thinking, that's great, but what about trauma? What about things that were genuinely done to me? Jung anticipated this exact question, and his answer might surprise you. Meet Marcus, a 35-year-old software engineer who couldn't maintain a relationship. Every time someone got close, he'd sabotage it. His story started with an absent father who promised to show up but never did. Birthday parties, baseball games, graduation, always an empty chair where Dad should have been. Jung would say Marcus wasn't just stuck because of what his father did. He was stuck because of what Jung called complexes in his personal unconscious, emotional clusters of memories, feelings, and beliefs that operate like independent programs running in the background of your mind. Marcus had developed what Jung would call a father complex. Every time someone tried to love him, this complex would activate, whispering, "They'll leave you too. Everyone always leaves." Marcus wasn't responding to his current girlfriend. He was responding to a 40-year-old wound that had never healed. But Jung discovered something remarkable. These complexes aren't your enemies. They're actually trying to protect you. The father complex was Marcus's psyche's attempt to shield him from future abandonment. The problem is, these protective mechanisms often become prisons. Jung's solution: don't fight the complex, dialogue with it. Marcus learned to recognize when his father complex was activated and actually have conversations with that wounded 8-year-old inside him. "I see you're scared," he'd say, "but this person isn't Dad. We're safe now." This brings us to Jung's most powerful concept for moving on: individuation. This isn't just about healing from the past. It's about becoming who you were always meant to be. Jung believed that life has 2 phases. The first half is about building an ego, achieving success, fitting in. But somewhere around midlife, though it can happen earlier, life demands something different. It demands that you become authentic, that you integrate all the rejected parts of yourself, that you stop living other people's definitions of success. This is where most people get stuck. They try to move on by returning to who they were, before the trauma, before the heartbreak, before the loss. But Jung says that's impossible, and more importantly, it's not the goal. Take Jennifer, a successful marketing executive whose world fell apart when her company downsized and she lost her job at 45. She spent months trying to land another high-paying corporate job, becoming increasingly bitter when nothing materialized. She was stuck because she was trying to resurrect her old self. Jung would say Jennifer's job loss wasn't a setback, it was an invitation to ask deeper questions. Who am I beyond my job title? What do I actually value? What wants to emerge in the second half of my life? When Jennifer stopped trying to go back and started moving forward into the unknown, everything changed. She discovered a passion for teaching that she'd buried for 20 years. She wasn't the same person who lost that job, and that was exactly the point. Jung called this process individuation, becoming who you uniquely are, not who you think you should be. But how do you actually do this work? How do you dialogue with your complexes and integrate your shadow? Jung developed a technique so powerful that it's still used by therapists today: active imagination. This isn't meditation or visualization. This is something far more radical. You consciously enter into relationship with the unconscious parts of yourself. Remember Marcus with his father complex? Instead of trying to think his way out of abandonment fears, he learned to visualize conversations with that absent father, not to forgive him or understand him, but to take back his power. In one powerful session, Marcus imagined telling his father, "You weren't capable of showing up, and that's on you, not me, but I'm not going to let your inability to love determine my ability to be loved." Jung discovered that when you give voice to these unconscious parts, they stop controlling you from the shadows. The abandoned child, the rejected lover, the humiliated employee, they all have something to say. And until you listen, they'll keep sabotaging your attempts to move forward. Active imagination isn't about changing the past. It's about changing your relationship to the past. It's about becoming the adult who can finally give that wounded part of you what it needed all along. This leads us to Jung's ultimate insight about moving on, the transcendent function. This is the psyche's ability to create something new from the tension between opposites. You're stuck not because you haven't tried hard enough to let go, but because you're treating moving on as a win-lose battle. Either you're over it or you're not. Either you're strong or you're weak. Either you trust or you don't. Jung says, this black and white thinking is what keeps you trapped. The transcendent function allows you to hold paradox. You can be hurt and resilient. You can be cautious and open to love. You can grieve your losses and be excited about your future. This is what real moving on looks like. Not the absence of pain, but the integration of all your experiences into a richer, more complex version of yourself. Think about the Japanese art of kintsugi, where broken pottery is repaired with gold. The bowl isn't trying to pretend it was never broken. The gold highlighting the cracks makes it more beautiful than it was originally. Jung would say, your job isn't to forget your heartbreaks, failures, and traumas. Your job is to find the gold that can transform those breaks into sources of wisdom, compassion, and strength. So what does this mean for you right now, lying in bed at 2 a.m., unable to let go of whatever has its hooks in you? First, stop trying to move on. Start trying to move through. The wound isn't your enemy. It's a doorway to a more authentic version of yourself. Second, get curious about what you're really avoiding. What part of your shadow is this situation reflecting back to you? What complex is being activated? What is your psyche trying to tell you? Third, start the dialogue, not with the person who hurt you, but with the parts of yourself that are still stuck. What does that wounded part need to hear? What wisdom do you have now that you didn't have then? And finally, trust the process. Jung spent his entire career studying human transformation, and he discovered something that might shock you. The psyche wants to heal. It wants to grow. It wants to become whole. Your job isn't to force this process, it's to stop interfering with it. The question isn't whether you can move on. The question is whether you're brave enough to become who you're meant to be on the other side of this experience. Carl Jung believed that every crisis is also an opportunity for rebirth. Your moment of transformation isn't coming someday. It's available right now. The only question left is, are you ready to step through the door?